perspective as well. And so, Kez, I'll turn it over to you. I'm really, really excited to have you moderating this. You are the perfect person to do this. You are such a great contributor to the startup community and to the ocean community generally. So over to you to talk to these founders.
Wow, thanks for the pep talk there, Don. What you don't know, Don, is that mental health is a huge part of my company, and it's a huge part of the work we do, and it's very important to me personally. I have a mental health buddy in Ontario that we text each other, you know, when stuff gets rough, because it's a really lonely place to be running a business sometimes, you know, and you know, sometimes it can be really real. But I also, Rebecca said I could just say like 3 words about a cool new initiative we're doing. So I'm going to do that. So, and part of this is to frame this to say, you know, why I'm here today is not just as someone who has a small company and, you know, things are hard sometimes, but also because we, as a community, and I put this slide up to show you how many people like really care, you know, we have a new initiative that's being funded by the supercluster called Ocean Allies. And there are so many businesses and organizations that are supporting it. And it's about making our ocean technology industry a more welcoming place for diversity. And, you know, that can be diversity on so many different axes. And I think that the way we process the world with our brains is also an axis of diversity that we need to include there. And the way people work is a way of point of diversity. So, you know, within Ocean Allies, we're doing a baseline of, you know, what is our current state of diversity. We don't actually know in the ocean sector what it looks like. I mean, you can take a snapshot of any networking event and make some judgment calls there, but, you know, we don't actually have data around that. We're trying to dismantle some of the systemic barriers. We're working with businesses to make their places a more inclusive place to work. We're doing networking opportunities. We're doing monthly coffee chats, career navigation support, additional financial support for employers to bring on diverse employees, and also public recognition for great work within the industry. So if you wanted to keep up with that, we do have a newsletter. If you go to tinyurl.com, Ocean Allies newsletter, then you can sign up there. But, you know, that's just a part of the reason why I'm here today. I'm also here as someone who founded a company and someone who likes talking to other founders about what's going on. So I am going to stop sharing my screen now so I can go back to my notes as everyone's seeing them. And so what I'd like to do is invite our founders who are here today, and I'm going to throw that to you. Why did you want to come and talk about mental health in front of a bunch of other people today? So I'll look for a hand or an unmute for who wants to jump on that one. Jason, you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm happy to. My name is Jason Gillham. I'm currently a founder of a company called Grand River Robotics, and formerly a founder of another company called 2G Robotics that was recently acquired by Sonardyne. So I've had an opportunity to go through a lot of that startup journey through that industry, and there are so many ups and downs with that, and loneliness is something that is a common theme that we've already mentioned here, but in any sort of founder groups that I started to be able to connect with over the course of that journey, having those connections was critical for allowing me to continue to push through the challenging pieces and get to a point of success.
Casey, I know you sent an article over to Dawn on the weekend about the Zappos founder, which I read on Monday morning. Great way to start the week. What brought you here today? Why did you want to do this?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to the panel. I probably know more founders and entrepreneurs than I do know people who are in the traditional jobs. That's kind of the circle that I have grown up with, and I've been in this for a while. We are Kavacha, which is a spin out from DNA Tech. We try and take toxicity and biofouling stress out of fish farming and in marine transportation. So I hear these stories every now and then of people really struggling with it day to day. And if anything that we discuss today or we share today helps anyone, then that is a great use of our time. And I'm also over here so I can learn from this founder group who have probably seen a lot and struggled with it in the real life too. So yeah, I mean, sharing and learning is something that is core to what I see as growth, and that's why I'm kind of excited to be talking about this as a panel. The article that I shared, just a quick note on that. Tony Say, who probably is one of the most accomplished and well-known founders ever. Since Steve Jobs, people have not mourned the person so much. He brought happiness to a lot of people. He connected people. He created businesses. He put investment in communities that were down in the luck, including Las Vegas and in Utah. However, he himself was deeply unhappy. So the human mind in itself is very complex. And anything that I share or say today, I would like to stress that that is my opinion and that is my journey. Everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own stressors. And if there is something that you glean from it, that is good. But please do not take that as a solution or a way to do things correctly. Tony thought he could hack happiness. And as brilliant as he was, there, at least in my opinion, there is no way to hack happiness. It is a very intricate thing that you work on deliberately, and accomplishment helps you, but it does not solve what is missing. If there is something missing, then it needs professionals like the senator who will be moderating our discussion.
Thanks, Casey. And Nadia, what brought you here today?
Sure. Hi guys, nice to meet you all, and yeah, excited to be here and have this discussion too. I think as the speakers just said themselves, so Jason was saying in terms of, you know, running a company has its ups and downs, and I guess let's not find ways to create more downs than ups. And so any tips that can be shared that can be helpful for people to try and create more of those ups than downs would be helpful. I'm also here to learn, so I'd love to share kind of what's been happening, what's helped, and see what others have been doing. And besides founders, I think, yeah, it's tough for everyone within the company too of a startup. So maybe sharing some tips on how you can help your employees and those that help you within your business to also kind of keep as many ups as possible as well.
Thanks, Nadia. So Stan, you're coming from an interesting perspective here today, not a founder, but a senator and a mental health professional. So I'm curious, what were your thoughts when you were invited to participate in this?
Well, first of all, tremendous honor to be asked to participate. People will know soon enough, if they don't know already, that I'm a member of the Fisheries and Oceans Committee of the Senate, and we'll be doing some deep dives into understanding oceans and fisheries, both in terms of bills that are coming before the Senate and also in studies that we're going to initiate from the Senate. So I'm very excited to be here and working in this sector. The challenge for any entrepreneur, any founder, is also common. There are uniquenesses within each sector, but also there are commonalities across all sectors. No individual that's a founder or an entrepreneur is somebody who doesn't appreciate the benefits and problems of taking risks. If you weren't someone who was willing to take on risk, you wouldn't be a founder or an entrepreneur. You would be working in a bureaucratic system somewhere. So that comes with the territory. And one of the most important things that we can remember is that goodness of fit. How does our personality, how do our strengths, how do our weaknesses, how do our social envelopes, the people that keep us grounded, how do they fit with our choice of direction vocationally? Do we come to entrepreneurship, to being a founder, from an area in which those components, personal and social are weak. If that's the case, we're going to struggle more. Do we come to that opportunity, that direction in our lives with those components being relatively robust? That won't stop us from struggling, but it will cushion the struggle, help mitigate the impact of the struggle. So I'm here to listen and to make whatever interventions I can that people might find helpful.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. So founders, and you don't have to answer this. So none of these questions you have to answer. And I will also say, anyone from the audience, you're welcome to jump in on the chat with a question. And I love to have a conversation between panelists. So like, if you want to agree or disagree, do it. Founders, let's talk about mental hurdles. What are some of the mental hurdles that you deal with as a founder? Casey?
I can go first. So as part of this panel, I had the chance to talk frankly with a few founders, and I made a list of what people see as stressors or as hurdles, as you put it. The number one thing that people say, and this was pointed in conversations, it is a very lonely path. It is a walk into the unknown, and a lot of it is on you. So it does get extremely lonely. On that aspect, as the senator said, do not be afraid to ask for help. People want to help you. People really do want to help you. You have to ask. And seeking the help of a mental health professional is probably the number one thing you can do to get a handle on any aspect that is bothering you. You will probably not know this without talking to a professional. Even if you are not able to access a professional, talking to people whom you trust or your close circle, and just talking. Conversation invites self-reflection. And once you have had the chance to talk that out, it allows you to understand yourself better too. And if you have a good friend, they will be willing to listen and maybe chime in a little bit here and there. The other aspect I see that people struggle with is they feel constantly being overwhelmed. And that's something I have deliberately worked on. And I have taken from one of the most productive people possibly known to us. That was President Eisenhower. And President Eisenhower had an Eisenhower matrix where he divided things that he did into urgent, important, and which is your daily tasks. This is where you do an 80-20. 20% of your tasks are worth 80% of the impact. So constantly optimizing that has helped me personally. Again, this is my opinion. Then there's the urgent, not important quadrant. This I call the laundry and the haircut quadrant. So that is something that you have to be aware of. It shouldn't get out of hand. The other quadrant that is extremely important and that you want to keep into the not urgent and important is mental health, exercise, and sleep. So dividing time for talking to people, for taking care of what is bothering you is extremely important. Having sleep and exercise is extremely important. And apportioning that time allows you to not have it move in the urgent quadrant. And the last one, probably where you can take some time out, is the not urgent and the not important quadrant. I call this the Netflix and the social media quadrant. You can probably take some time away from it to things that you really need to do, particularly sleep. It has helped me quite a bit. I used to sleep 4 or 3 hours a day when I was going at things, and then I said no. 7 or 8 hours a day is extremely important, and it helps. The aspect of lack of security is something that does bother quite a few people. I personally do not have an answer to that. This is something that you probably talk to your closer circle. To me, it is a very natural thing for me to do. However, it is people have different stressors. The other aspect is fear of the unknown and fear of failure, where if you have something that you're walking into and you don't know it, then it can cause extreme stress in terms of what you're thinking about. And the number one thing that has personally helped me is something that we are trained, I grew up in India, we are trained as kids. It is part of what is the essence of yoga or yoga. It is basically controlling your breathing, and this is something that may sound very easy, but it is extremely hard to do. If you are able to control your breathing to the sense where it is low and slow, 6 breaths a minute works for me, then that helps with your metabolism, your thinking. There have been studies after studies done, including by scientists at Harvard and NYU, and perhaps you can access those, that helps with your common thinking, your focus, your energy. It is a part of pranayama, which is well known. The other part of yoga that is probably not as well known is pratyahara, which basically means that it is a withdrawal of senses. If you can keep your mind blank for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, very hard to do. Again, this is something that takes a lot of practice, but that helps with keeping away from the stress of the fear of the unknown. And I will end this with saying that, again, this is something that works for me, and probably there are steps in your particular pathway that you could take to address some of the hurdles that you see in your daily life.
Thanks, Casey. Jason?
Yeah, for me, it was always cash flow. So coming up to payroll, figuring out like what is that one thing that's going to stress me out. It was going to always be managing cash, because for me as an entrepreneur, it was never short on having ideas, and so wanting to push the envelope of what that financial runway was in the business in order to be able to execute on more things and more ideas, and maintaining that discipline to maintain an adequate cash runway. That was always the biggest stress.
Nadia?
When you asked the question, the first thing that popped into my head was that my hurdle was the imposter syndrome, which kind of spans across a lot of those different areas. And Casey, I love the research. I think probably fits a lot in with the loneliness and the overwhelmment part. But I had the luxury that at least I have 2 other co-founders. So the 3 of us, are starting to get our company off the ground, but still we have to do everything as a founder, and founders are. So they're expected to do everything to keep things going and keep things running and keep the cash flows going. And then as you start to grow and build a team, suddenly the imposter syndrome switches to a whole different realm where suddenly you have to be the visionary and make sure that everyone stays excited about staying involved in your company. So I think for me, it's often been what felt like imposter syndrome, because it's having to do a lot of different things all at once. But then obviously getting that help from others has been really helpful in that too.
Yes, Dan, I know you want to talk about imposter syndrome, and I want you to talk about imposter syndrome.
I just wanted to reflect on that. If you don't have, first of all, it's not a syndrome. I mean, it's a pop psychology thing. But if you don't have that occasionally, frequently, you're not actually making a rational analysis of what you're doing. I'll tell you that is, when I talk to my colleagues in the Senate, people say, how come I'm here? Well, I don't deserve to be here. I'm an imposter. It's common. It's very, very common. It actually is a sign that you are reflecting on what you're doing. You are looking at your strengths and your weaknesses, and you are trying to balance those strengths and weaknesses against the demands that you're in. I mean, welcome to real life. That's normal. It's a normative part of engagement with the struggles and challenges that life brings us. A couple of people have Jason has raised, Casey has raised also the issue of loneliness. I think it's really, really important for us to differentiate loneliness from being alone.
Mhm.
They're very different things. Being alone is actually, for many people, a refreshing, uplifting, go back to the well and get some strength kind of thing. It's actually part of good psychological health, the capacity to be alone, to recharge your batteries alone. And in a world that is so networked and so constantly demanding of you, you actually have to spend time, give yourself time. Casey did a nice job of identifying that, to actually, and give yourself permission to be alone. So that's so important. The loneliness part, there's a saying that it's lonely at the top. It's, I've been a senior person in lots of organizations, and it is lonely up there. That's also a part of the challenge that you face in your workplace. And the two ways that we deal with that: first of all, we recognize that that's there. Secondly, we deal with it both professionally and personally. On the professional side, we do what we're doing now. We reach out to individuals who are like us, who are having the same challenges and struggles in our professional lives, and we share those, and we learn from them, we understand, and we get a support network there. Equally, if not more important, are the connections in our personal lives. And here, if it is so important that we have a network of people that care about us and we care about them, not because of the work we do, but because of who we are. Human connection is the key to improving the human condition. Period. Full stop. As an entrepreneur, as a founder, your human connection has to be twofold, and you have to pay attention to both parts of it. The human connection with people who have similar professional, vocational challenges that you do, but really, and more importantly, the human connection to people that care for you as a human being. They don't give a darn whether you're the president of a company. They care for you because you're you. That's the thing you have to focus on.
Stan, your differentiation between loneliness and never alone became so apparent to me when I became a parent, because I could both not be craving being alone, because you're never alone as a parent, and yet be so deeply lonely, because I got to tell you, 2-year-olds are the worst conversationalists. Like, we have nothing in common. But I'd like to pick up on that whole networking support thing there. And people are probably wondering, like, where is that networking and support that you get? I know that there are definitely times of loneliness in my journey, but I also have been so, to pick up on what a couple of our founders have said, there are so many people who are willing to help. Casey brought up, ask for help, people will give it. I have found that whenever I reach out, people are so happy and so generous with their time. I'd be curious to hear from our founders, who is part of your network of support, because I think it might help people in the audience and who might watch this recording later to know where to look for that network of support as a founder. So you want to jump on that one? Who is your network? Jason?
In terms, go ahead.
Yes, certainly. So for me, certainly there's being in Kitchener-Waterloo area, there's a strong network of existing entrepreneurial support with organizations like Communitech, and I know organizations like that, including Cove, exist really everywhere. So having that network of other founders that you can discuss how crappy things can be at points can be very sort of supportive in your journey. And then if even if there isn't a solution that comes out of those problems, there's at least something to be said about talking through things, because once I've talked through things, it helps to at least put things within context, because you can end up in that very narrow mindset of what this specific problem is, versus stepping back and being able to talk to people at a broader scale. But going back to your question, for me, it becomes about the other support networks and paid mentors that those networks are able to bring forward.
Nadia?
Yeah, I actually started with an overlap of the two connection areas that Stan just mentioned. So going into kind of my friend circle, looking at those that either had similar roles or same roles as I did, and being able to have those really frank and open conversations of, I don't know what I'm doing, what are you doing? And, you know, and then realizing kind of the humanity that is there as well, that no one really knows, but they do, because everyone's there to help support as well. So I was lucky enough to have that overlap. But then other than that, also reaching out to different types of networks that were support networks of others within, whether it's the impact space or the ocean space, where, yeah, people are kind of going in the same direction and can have some kind of commonality and familiarity with what you're going through as well. That those have been really, really helpful. And yeah, and can't stress it enough. People are always willing to help. So especially if you reach out to them genuinely and ask for that support. I've never been turned down, and I've also never turned down anyone that's asked for that type of support.
Casey, maybe we can build on that and just kind of talk about how to ask for that help in the startup community.
Absolutely, Chris. And to the point that the senator brought up, your family does not care if you had a Series A or an IPO. They care about you. They care about you, and just calling them up, talking to them. It doesn't even have to be about the startup or any metrics or anything that you've seen. It's just a conversation that allows you to that's a human touch. You know, it's a fundamental human need. In our day-to-day life, especially as founders, we are very rational. We constantly optimize. We have metrics, we have milestones. As human beings, no matter how rational you think you are, we are deeply emotional. Even the most rational person is deeply emotional. And to be self-aware of the fact that we are deeply emotional allows you to connect to people and just talk. It really doesn't have to be about your day-to-day life of a startup. The other aspect is it's really critical, and I have sadly seen a lot of cases where a very promising startup crumbled because there was conflict between people who were running. It is very critical to have a business partner who you enjoy talking to, who you enjoy building things with. And I've had one for the last 10 years. We were in grad school together. I call him up, we talk about all kinds of things. It's not even about the startup. So being self-aware that you have a certain duty in terms of execution, but your particular hurdles may not even be meeting those milestones. It may just be talking to someone, and that helps you focus more. So just calling up the phone, talking to 5 people who are on your list. Hey, what's going today? You know, what did you cook? Or what's your day looking like? You know, what did you think about the Browns winning again? Stuff like that. That is okay. You know, and that helps you kind of be grounded, and also allows you to come back and refocus. At least in my opinion.
Can I just maybe follow up on that and kind of combine some of what both of them talked about and ask the senator a question around going back to imposter syndrome, which I understand isn't a syndrome, but well, it's one thing that you're saying, hey, this is an acceptable thing as we analyze through our day and our thought, hey, it's acceptable. But how do we then take that understanding of it's acceptable and then leverage that to make our businesses better?
That's an excellent question, Jason. And let me answer that by going a little bit parallel to that question, but try to put it into context. That kind of emotional cognitive dissonance that Nadia was talking about arises when we're faced with stressors, when there are challenges that are happening in our lives. And it's part of the normal human response to a challenge or opportunity. And a challenge is an opportunity flipped on its side, as you know better than I do. And when we look at that, we get the sort of rush, we call it a hyperarousal phenomenon. And that's perfectly and totally normal. It has a purpose. The purpose is to alert us that there is a challenge and opportunity, and we're going to have to deal with it, or we can deal with it. The first part of responding to that realization is what we call cognitive appraisal. That is, how do you think about the emotional response that you're getting? You can appraise that as, oh my gosh, I'm being overwhelmed. This thing is way too big for me. I can't handle it. You can go into all these sort of negative cognitive frameworks, which will take you in a very bad direction. Or you can say, and you have the capacity to do this. You have to learn sometimes how to do this. You can say, oh my gosh, this signal is telling me that I have an opportunity or I have a problem that I have to deal with. Okay. That simple cognitive reframing of the experience that you're having can put you in one direction or into another direction. One direction leads to challenge and difficulty and ill health. The other challenge actually leads to healthy response. We've known this since before the time of Christ. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, talked about it and developed that understanding. Okay, it has become very vogue in the last decade and so to think when we have a stress response, all we have to do is self-soothe. No, 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 no. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to tell us we have an opportunity and a challenge. So first we do the cognitive reappraisal. And Nadia, my guess is that you say, oh, I'm an imposter. And then you work your way through and say, oh, I'm not really an imposter. Everyone's an imposter. We're all on the same page. Off we go. So that's good. That's very healthy. And then you problem solve. Okay, what do I need to do to solve the problem that the signal is telling me is there? When you have solved the problem, the signal goes away. That's a note to self. I have solved that problem. Now I have also adapted. I have a new skill set. And when I come against a similar problem in the future, I'll just truck out my skill set. And Casey also talked about the third component, which is decreasing the hyperarousal, that intensity, when you're in the middle of it. And he's absolutely right. Breathing is actually the frontal cortex of the brain controlling using the parasympathetic nervous system to shut down the arousal message. You don't need a fancy app. You don't need to pay a gazillion dollars. You don't need diamonds on the soles of your shoes. None of that is needed. All you have to learn to do is control your breathing. That'll bring down your arousal. There you go.
It's funny for me. I find if I do the soothing methodology, it comes back, comes roaring back. Usually at 4 a.m. At 4 a.m. I'll wake up and I'll be like, it's worry time. Excellent. As opposed to for me, I find if I externalize my problem, and I find that helps in terms when you feel like a fraud, if you start writing stuff down. So if I externalize my problem, so Jason, I totally feel you on the cash flow thing. That is so real. You just write that down, and then you take that, what you're saying, like, what is your action to that arousal state? If I create an action plan that I've written down the problem, so now I've put it over there, and then I make an action plan, I can go back to sleep, which is super thrilling. But I wonder as well, there takes so much self-confidence to start a business, and doubt, I find, is huge. Nadia, you mentioned it. Jason, you mentioned it as well. The idea you're like, I don't know. And this commonality, we don't want to feel lonely. I mean, we know loneliness is really tough, but it's also really tough, I find, to air my dirty laundry as a startup, because I need people to believe in me. I don't feel like I can afford to have someone think, she doesn't have her stuff together, right? So I'm wondering, I know I have a strategy for that, and it's about talking to people who don't care about my business. you know, so finding that second group. And I'm wondering if any of the other founders have found that outlet for airing their dirty laundry.
I would say I have not. I don't think I've ever done that particularly well. In the particularly early days of 2G Robotics, everything was pretty closed and not very transparent. As we went through more cycles of challenge, there needed, in order to maintain and demonstrate trust within the company, I needed to become more and more transparent about what the state of things were. And so building, I didn't have co-founders. And so having a strong leadership group and more visibility within the business and bringing them in as partners is where I got towards at the end. But there were still some real pitfalls with that, particularly around what's this guy doing? He doesn't know his stuff. We're coming up in bad shape here, and not everybody has the psychological fortitude to necessarily want to go along that journey with you. And so it was around understanding at what points of that roller coaster to bring people in versus not, and I don't have an answer.
Yeah, along those lines. So firstly, my co-founder is also my partner, which isn't always the best, well, definitely not always the best idea, but it does help in the situations where we need to support each other. But along the lines of transparency, this was actually something that became quite relevant to us as a company earlier this year. So we've always tried to practice very transparent principles within the company. But things like the cash flows were somewhat still kind of guarded a bit because we didn't want to worry people too much, especially within the company. And then when COVID hit, so earlier this year, we were supposed to go to market with our first product, and then COVID hit. So that definitely affected our cash flows. And initially, the three of us, the directors, we're panicking because we had still funding available, but there was a limit to it, and we were wondering at what point we share this with the employees. And we decided that as a whole, we wanted to be transparent, so we wanted to share with them what we had and what we didn't have and how long it would last. So around March timeframe, we shared all our information with our employees, and with that also asked for their support in how they thought we should respond. And then a really miraculous thing happened, and I don't know if this happens all the time, but I believe in kind of the power of the transparent operations and the kind of the support of others. But the whole team decided that as a best course of action, our company should furlough for 2 months, which was a hard decision, but it made it a lot easier that the company was bought in and it wasn't coming from a top-down decision, and people weren't afraid of losing their jobs. They knew how much runway we had. They knew what needed to happen. And besides furlough, a bunch of suggestions came up on how we could make savings, what costs could be cut. So everyone was in it. And this has actually extended our runway an additional 6 months, even beyond what it was before. And I think we're stronger than ever. Granted, obviously, it's still tough times, but I think this has massively helped the company. And I think it's empowered people also to be able to feel the power to say what they think the strategy of the company should be, which has been really great.
Nadia, can I pick up on you mentioning how your partner is your co-founder, because that was always has been a challenge for me, where my wife and I, a substantial part of our value and net worth is the business, but she's very much not in that entrepreneurial mindset, that this wasn't necessarily what she was wanting. So I had a lot of challenge when we talked about who we would go to for support. My wife was obviously somebody who is key on wanting to provide me with that support, but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily want to bring her in on all of the roller coaster and ups and downs of the business. And I'd love to get your thoughts on how you manage that, given that they're right in the business with you. And
yeah, and it's hard to kind of keep those lines separated for us, but I think we're also very strict of trying to do that as much as possible and separating work from personal. So come 6 p.m., we stop talking about work. If there's any work issues, we don't raise it until the next day. So I think we're very open and supportive, and bring our work problems to each other, but only during work times. So because yeah, we kind of, we need that time to just have our life as well, and let it not consume us completely.
So
I don't know
both
if that helps.
Nadia and Kshitij have brought up like bounding things, that there needs to be limits. So you talk about that at 6 p.m. For me, it's 5. And one of the questions we have from the audience here is from Yuji Chang. If you love what you do and you keep pushing yourself, how do you balance your self-motivation without sacrificing productivity? They want to jump in on that one?
I think a lot of it comes down to prioritization. So some of the tips that Casey gave in terms of those quadrants, it's pretty much that. I think it's a very good framework to go by. Not the only one, as he mentioned, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what needs the most of your attention and for what good reason, and making sure being quite strict about mentally knowing what you need for your mental well-being, and when to draw the line. So as I said, so the 6 p.m. cutoff time, weekends, absolutely no work, as busy as it gets. But yeah, it's knowing that the world won't end necessarily, even though sometimes it feels like it will.
Can I just make a comment on that? I think, Nadia, you just hit the nail on the proverbial head. The world won't end, although sometimes it feels like it will. And I'm one of the original 80 hours a week guys. Have been my whole life, and have struggled with doing less, because I always thought the world would end if I didn't get that little last thing done, or that little research project, or usually writing a grant for God Almighty. So it never. And when I look back on it, I say, why? And so setting realistic expectations is so important. And that realistic expectation has to be not just for the business, but has to be for your personal life, your family life, if you have kids, with your kids, if you have friends, with your friends. So remember, I think we need to keep reminding ourselves that we are composite of a whole bunch of incredible riches in this world, of which our business is one. And that's something that we have to keep reminding ourselves of.
Sorry, just at the same time, one of the things that I think is important is to learn how to love the shitty things that come up, and figuring out how to, because inevitably, if you have a huge goal, that I think it becomes challenging to necessarily achieve that without some degree of sacrifice in other areas. And so figuring out how to get fulfillment and enjoyment and love those shitty things is going to be part of what helps get towards those business goals that are set as in that framework.
I really feel your question here, Yuji. It's I'm a workaholic. There's like, and that whole question of like, when do you know you're a workaholic? And the answer is like, when it's a problem. And the reality there is very much that, in Casey, they put a really good point on that personal care of like exercise and sleep and eating well. If you don't address those, they will move themselves over to the urgent category. And so I had a real realization earlier this year, now that I have 10 employees, that I can't afford to not take care of those things, because other people depend on me. And so even though it seems like I need to write just one more email, if I don't take care of my mental and physical health, then I'm going to let everyone down, right? And that one email is irrelevant compared to letting everyone down because I don't take care of myself. And I think that goes back to Stan's point. it's just one thing, right? It's just one aspect of your life. And if you let yourself as a person down, then you let everyone down.
Yeah, and it's setting that example for those in your company, right? So you don't want to be the hypocrite. So
yeah, totally. So Nadia, you brought up COVID, so we're going to talk about it now. So let's talk about COVID and mental health. Stan, as someone who works in this field, the news seems to be that it's a tough year for everyone.
Well, it is, and it should be, because COVID is a huge threat to our lives. And if you're not feeling concerned, worried, upset, perturbed, you're brain dead. So let's be real about this. What we have seen, however, is just a plethora of very poorly designed surveys, reports, polls, all asking people, have they felt anxious? And then people say yes, not asking them any other questions about their emotional state, and then saying, oh, we have a mental health crisis. We don't have a mental health crisis. We have people that are responding to the challenge. It's the same thing as if you take your heart rate when you're sitting still, you got a 64 or 72 beats per minute. Then you take your heart rate when you're running, it's 160. Oh my gosh. No, there's nothing wrong with your heart. You're not sick at 160 when you're running, because it's supposed to do that. So again, I talk about the stress response. We're supposed to get all those feelings when we're faced with this big threat, because that's what we use to signal us to solve the problem. How are we going to solve the problem? We're going to follow public health advice. We're going to take care of others. We're going to do all these things. And when that happens and the rates go down, it means that we're doing the right thing. In the Atlantic bubble, the rates have gone down. We're not all other parts of Canada, you haven't solved the problem and you're still going . Okay, so we have to be really careful about the kind of stuff you see out in the newspapers. Keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. Think it through.
And so, how has that affected you as founders running a business during COVID? Nadia, you talked about some major decisions you made, and I'm sure that was an experience. Casey and Jason, did you find it a particularly stressful time, or what have you learned about yourself during this period?
So to Senator's point, it is supposed to be stressful. You are coping with once in a lifetime pandemic, and if that doesn't change your normal way of doing things, then probably it's time for self-examination. Now, it's probably not always something that hits your startup. I know cash flow has been mentioned a few times, and first rule of business, they say never run out of cash. So that's something that definitely would stress folks. For us as a business, we work a lot with research labs, national labs. So putting that particular protocol in, where you are able to do the set of experiments, is a task, and it kind of delays things, delays development time. And that is perfectly understandable as long as people are safe. What stresses you, obviously, is that, or stresses you a lot, is you're away from your loved ones, people who you would like to see. And thanks, Meredith, for joining us and for getting through this. You have to have a partner or family that you can connect with on a daily basis. And a lot of this stress that we deal with in startups is probably not the stress of meeting milestones or metrics. It's realizing that what is important to you, constantly asking what is important to you, staring at the evening sky. That's one of my favorite things to do on the island. It is so beautiful. Talking to people who you really want to connect with, no matter COVID, that is challenging, puts a stress on you, and that is important. Now, if the development time is delayed, if, let's say, funding dries up for something that is not a sure thing, then that is part of what everyone is dealing with. And you can look at those responses from folks who are dealing with it and respond accordingly. Now, when this COVID started, Sequoia sent in a letter saying it's all doom and gloom. Everyone should accept a scale back of funding and all the valuations are going to go down. Now, right now, what has happened is that VC money has flowed in at an unprecedented level. And what Sequoia did with that is that it got bargains on valuations. So you have to be careful of people who think they can predict the future and correlate it to what is happening in the COVID. They may have incentives of their own. So keeping that in mind keeps you level and grounded as well.
Yeah, there's also just the level of adaptability to the situation. So obviously COVID's been awful and I wish it hadn't happened, and there's been so many negative sides of it. So I almost feel guilty of saying the positives that have come out of it, but there's definitely been positives both for myself and the company, not because of COVID directly, but because how it has caused us to react and reflect and adapt to the situation. So I think things slowed down for our business. And while that wasn't great for our cash flows, what it did allow us to do was to reflect on our strategy, look at where we were going and how we might want to change things and adjust. And I think that's actually, really helped the company itself and also given us a bit more of a goal and a vision versus just getting bogged down by the day-to-day operations that we were suffering from. So in that respect, I think, that time for reflection and looking at the stars, as Casey says, just appreciating that and also not feeling like we need to do all the time, but just be as well.
Hearing a really interesting thread, Stan brought it up very early in the conversation that when you are an entrepreneur, you need to reconcile that you've taken on a risky lifestyle and look at your personality traits and see if you're comfortable with that. And Nadia and Casey both brought up there that how COVID has really brought that home for people, that you really need to reconcile what you're doing with what you want to be doing and be comfortable with that in order to respond to these kinds of situations. So I'd love to hear as well what, let's talk advice because we're coming to the end of our time. So I want to leave people with some tools. What is the best piece of advice as a founder you've received when it comes to your mental health? They don't ever give me any advice. There's another question. No one's ever given me any advice on being a founder of mental health.
I'll go first and keep it quick. I shy away from giving advice because everyone's journey is very different. And as the senator has alluded, pop psychology does way more harm than good, at least in my opinion. So what has helped me is moving away from making happiness conditional. If you get a tranche of funding, or if you are able to execute on a milestone, or if you are able to create a certain customer base, that will not give you increased happiness. Happiness in itself is something that you deliberately work on while you also work on your startup. And the risk that you have taken is intrinsic to who you are. It's as the senator brought it up, it's a risk trait that we probably have. All of us could probably be making way more money consulting or on Wall Street, but we choose to do this. There is a reason we choose to do this. It is part of who we are. And to make our happiness not conditional on something, it takes a lot of time. We have been trained that way. If I get this paper done, then I will go and have a box of chocolate, something like that, or I will go see a movie, or I will watch this game. Then staying away from that, making happiness or making your mental health a goal in itself is something that people have shared with me, have helped them, and it has helped me too.
Just talking about some of my thoughts there. For me, it was about finding good habits and ensuring that there was a degree of routine to be able to work through certain things. And so whenever things would come up, if there was a degree of ability to sort of pattern, this is what this is, and now this is how I have pre-planned how I'm going to be able to deal with this or work through this problem. And then, so for me, exercise always kind of became that. We talked a little bit earlier about sort of the breathing, and changing your breathing really changes things. For me, exercise and maintaining a routine of exercise is what gave me that consistency of routine to my life to be able to reflect through things, and then work through anything from cash flow to feeling of inferiority through issues. And that's how I've worked through some dark times.
I think there was a bit of a existential crisis for me when we started growing our team. And so kind of as founders, as mentioned before, it's like we do a lot and we feel like it's all on us a bit. And so it's shifting from that mindset of being a doer to then finding people that are really great or even better than what you can do, and being able to support them. So I think it's helped my mental health and well-being in terms of feeling like I need to do everything, to then figuring out how I can best support others to be their best. And yeah, seeing what's needed there and how do I plug those missing gaps for them.
So I think I might, if you don't mind, Stan, a little bit on you for our last words here about if someone is, having a bad day or struggling with their mental health in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, what would you suggest that they do?
Well, the first thing is that needing to differentiate what are the normal responses to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I mean, when life sucks sometimes, and sometimes we get overwhelmed and things are bad, that's often very normal. And it's differentiating those kind of situations from when things are beyond just a normal response to the stuff that life is throwing at us. And in the first component, we reach out for assistance, for help, for comfort to those people who we trust the most. Casey talked about trusting somebody. That can be a partner, it can be a friend, it can be a family member, it can be whatever. And study after study of longitudinal healthy aging shows that probably the most important factor in anyone's healthy life, healthy aging, is having someone to reach out to when you need to, right? Period. And that goes along with what I said, human connection is the key to the human condition. Then the second thing is, how do we identify if things are beyond that? So what are the red flags? Well, they are severe and persistent symptoms. They just won't go away week after week after week. We're despondent, disgruntled, depressed, low. Our functioning, we have to push ourselves for weeks after week after week just to do the simplest things, get out of bed, make ourselves a meal. That our interpersonal relationships with the people that we care most about are fractured and frayed. That we can't have common supportive discussions, that it's a fight, everything's a fight. Okay, we may be having suicidal thoughts, feelings that everything is hopeless, we can't go on. Those are signals that you may need more than just reaching out to your partner or friend. And reaching out for help, and that is now where you go to someone who can help you. It could be a counselor, it could be a spiritual, a faith-based healer. It could be your family doctor and say, or a psychologist and say, look, I think I need some extra help in this. That realization and that reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness. It is actually a sign of great strength. It is taking responsibility for yourself by realizing that you can't quite do it alone, and that there are people that can do it together with you. So that's how I would look at it.
Thanks so much, Stan. I think that would be really helpful to me have heard in my times of darkness. And so I hope that it will be helpful to anyone who needs to hear that today. As you say, there's normal responses, and then sometimes there's abnormal responses. And I think that first point of phone a friend is a really great one, because they can also be a really good point of like, are you having a normal response right now? Because if it's someone who's known you for a long time, they can be like, this is not, you're not behaving normally right now. You need to call someone else. So with that, I think Dawn and I are going to thank our panelists for today. So thank you so much. I know that it is a particularly difficult space. You know, mental health has a stigma, and being a founder and talking about mental health, like, are you kidding me? So thank you so much for that today. It's no small ask. And I think we're also going to head over to a fancy new thing now. So Dawn, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm actually going to get Rebecca to tell us about that, but I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Jason, Nadia, Casey, Senator Kutcher, because this is just it's been such a wonderful conversation, and the rawness, the openness, that desire to share your story and the struggles you've had is just such an important part of life generally, but also being a startup founder, because it is a really, really tough thing to do a lot of the time, highs and lows, as Casey said, trying to stay balanced, but really, really just appreciate this. It is, it's going to make a difference to a lot of people, and we're going to make sure that we push this out and continuously push it out so that people can find it and use this talk if they need it. So thank you all so much for the time. Really, really appreciate it.